Sure, ma'am. Good afternoon. I am Nisha Nahata, a fourth-year student at GNLU. On behalf of the Center for Women and Children's Rights, we welcome you all to this talk on women and law, experiences from women. Before we begin our session, I'd like to quickly give a background on today's topic. The topic, the date of 8th March, is observed as International Women's Day by UNESCO. This day is a global day celebrating the social, economic, and cultural achievements of a women. It also marks a call to action for accelerating gender parity. In the backdrop of the global pandemic and in light of achieving the primary objective, the theme for the International Women's Day, as declared by UNESCO, is women leadership, achieving an equal future in a COVID-19 world. I would like to start by giving a brief introduction to the center. The Center for Women and Children's Rights was established to acknowledge the need for more extensive research and capacity building on issues relating to women and child welfare in India and in Gujarat in particular, and to strengthen public policy through independent, non-partisan, and rigorous research and analysis in the overall welfare of women and children. The center is headed by Dr. Asha Verma, who is an assistant professor of law at JNI. She has conducted a study of the implementation of the Maternity Benefit Act 1961 and has compared it with other existing schemes in association with the National Commission for Women. The welcome address will be given by Professor Dr. Mamta Biswal. Ma'am is the Dean of Faculty and Academic Affairs and Professor of Law at GNLU and ICSSR's Senior Research Fellow. Her areas of expertise are corporate laws, international trade law, and insolvency and bankruptcy law. She is the Center Director of the Center for Corporate and Insolvency. She has also been inducted as an independent women director in various Gujarat-based PSU. Ma'am, I would like you to.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am.
Okay. So, good evening to you all. First of all, I wish you all a very happy International Women's Day. And today, I think is the celebration is 108 years. If I remember the first celebration, which was in 1913, but before that 2 year celebration was there on February 28th. But when we consider March 8th, then it is the 108th year. And there it is a very proud moment for all of us. Respected Madam Abha Singh ma'am, my dear alumni Sriya Maini, and my dearest colleague Dr. Asha Verma, the head of the center, my colleagues from academics, my students, the center convener, the research cadre, assistant professors and research associates, and all the participants. I welcome all of you to this event on this International Women's Day 2021. So when I think about this women empowerment, and today Abha Singh ma'am and Sriya both are there, and who will speak a lot about this issues and successes in the workplaces, particularly the legal practice. But when I think about women empowerment, always I feel that it is one of the research topic every year, because this topic is never a old topic. When we do research, we say this is a outdated topic, research is done, but this is one area which is one of the contemporary topic every year, because the one side the success and empowerment that goes on, and the other side the violence against women and crime particularly when we compare, even when I compare with our Indian Penal Code, the provisions, then you will see the change that how depending on the different natures of crime, the law is also changing. That is why this is said law is an instrument for social change. And in this particular area also the same thing. When we see the this inclusion of the new provisions, acid attack, stalking in the Indian Penal Code, then sexual harassment at workplace, that is in that is not included recently, but before this acid attack and others, it was included. So in that way, when we examine our existing law of the country, then also there is a change which makes this topic very contemporary. Then when we look at the challenges for the women, then we see the um, uh, violences, and there is no end to the violence and atrocities against women. One side we see very recently, we all have watched the news and felt very proud. Swati Mohan, when we saw that she led the this NASA rover to Mars, when we all felt very proud that a lady scientist has done this. At the same time, we feel that everyday news that a minor girl is gang raped, a woman is burnt and killed. So those are the two sides and very contradictory points. But at the same time, I think every one of us will accept that law has brought some balance. I don't say that law has empowered everyone, but law has brought some balance in the society. But at the same time, when this dynamic nature to the nature of crime, the procedure, the technology, so one side we say there is a development in technology, we all are advanced. At the same time, technology also has created certain problem for the women. So that everywhere this both the things are there. And in India particularly, if we examine the post-constitution period, then the constitutional right, fundamental right, the different legal rights, the rights under personal laws, then very specific laws which are legislated for the gender justice. There is, we can say that yes, we have very adequate legislative action, judicial intervention, and also executive action for the gender justice. But at the same time, why the question is that despite of so many things, why we face every day all these issues in our society. So there I feel that the empowerment which is happening at different stages. I'm not talking about me or we along with us today. Abha Singh ma'am is there, who is a very successful woman in India. When you look at her profile, the civil servant leaving the job and practice. Really, it is a very proud moment to have madam here. And at the same time, it's very small girl, our own alumni who is a speaker today, Sriya. I remember when she was just 18, 20, she was the topper of the class and she went for practice. And in such a young age, I just imagine, I cannot imagine, I'm sorry, that she is the advocate on record where people struggle for that. So there's a yes, women empowerment is there. But when I look at the ladies who are working in my office, they say that due to COVID, we don't get even money to buy vegetables. We are harassed by this, that. So those are like two different area, and law has brought some control and also balance. But I think we need a certain area that is one is education, one is health, other one is legal education, which can bring really the social, economic, and the a real empowerment to the women in India. And for that, education can be a strong tool. And from education only people can learn and economic empowerment. And after economic empowerment, I think these many issues can be solved. At the same time, education is one of the area which we should focus on. But when ma'am is there and Sriya is there, and there may be many participants who are witnessed to so many issues and success at the same time, they can also speak well that where we should do. But my point is that while celebrating this 108th year, I may be wrong because I am considering 2013, but this day was started in 1913. This day celebration was started in 1911. That time I think the day was 28th February, International Women Day. After 2 years, 8th March was considered because of Chetkin, Germany, that we are celebrating this day. But my point, concluding point is that yes, empowerment is taking place, and the series of judgments says that how the judiciary is taking care of that, and people like Abamam and many activists who are bringing all these issues before court, legislature, there is no end. But at the same time, there is a dark area again. So I think these are the few points. If we can discuss and deliberate and can bring some solution, that would be a really social service. I don't talk about that Satipratha. Yes, Satipratha was one violence in 40 years back. But today we are witnessing that child rape, which one cannot imagine that in a country like India, such things happen. Even today morning news, if you will see, there is one incident. So while celebrating this day, it is very painful also to see all these emerging issues against the women. But at the same time, we should look forward with a very optimistic approach. And with that, let's again celebrate. And I think not only me or Assamam, everyone is waiting for Abamam and Sriya to listen from them. What is their view and how can we again go forward? So with this again, I thank everyone, and I congratulate to my dearest colleague, Dr. Verma, for organizing such a program and to bringing such impactful persons as the speaker on this day. I am really very happy, and I thank Abamam and Sriya for coming to this event, and I thank all the participants. And Madam, again, congratulations. Madam, namaste, and thank you everyone. Thank you very much.
So shall I start?
Yes, ma'am. Ma'am, actually, I think Nisha has some problem from her end and the network. Ma'am, before you begin, I'll just introduce you. Thank you, Mamta ma'am, for the welcome.
What do you want?
With this, I would like to introduce our first speaker for today. Miss Abha Singh is a practicing advocate at the Bombay High Court, a social activist, and a former civil servant. She has done considerable work in the realm of women's rights, gender equality, and justice. Sensing the call of duty beyond service, she gave up a successful career in the government to serve a larger cause by donning the legal ropes. Through her NGO, Run Samar, she offers free legal assistance advocacy to helpless women and slum dwellers who have been unfairly persecuted by local authorities and builders for the land that is rightfully theirs. I welcome you, ma'am, and it is an honor to have you today with us. Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you, Shivani, for such a warm welcome. And I was listening to Mamta Biswalji. You really gave us a very good perspective of what you want me to speak on. And my best wishes to Asha Verma from the GNLU Center for Women and Child Rights, all the participants, all the students, the faculty. I was just thinking it's NLU Gujarat. And at the moment I think of Women's Day, in fact, I tweeted also that with a heavy heart, I am wishing people at sometimes I don't want to wish also, because Aisha's face comes to my mind, that this girl who committed suicide because of dowry harassment. So a girl who makes a video, who is so young, who has not seen the world, who has just got married, commits suicide because she's being harassed and doesn't want her father to run from court to court, and does not want to do a case, does not want to file a case against the loved ones. So this is what is the story of law. Your topic is cases from within. What is women and law? Women and law is that here is a married woman who's being, newly married girl, who is being harassed for dowry, but does not want to pursue a case on her husband. Rather, she wants to commit suicide and leave the world. So today, if I talk of bride burning, dowry death, every 1 hour, a young bride is burnt in India for lack of dowry, for bringing insufficient dowry. You have every 4 hours, a woman is trafficked in this country. She's sold for trading. She's sold for prostitution. You have a rape every 15 minutes in this country. You have an attempt to rape every 2 hours in this country. So what does that mean? Does that mean that the law what we have has not been successful in making women safe? Does that mean that the legislatures, the parliament which made the law, had a non-application of mind? It did not provide sufficient checks and balances? Or it means there is corruption at the police level, and that is why they don't write proper FIRs, or when they file charge sheets in the courts, they leave so many loopholes, and which are used by the lawyers of the accused to go scot-free. So these are the parameters I want you all to think about, because it's an afternoon. After lunch, you must be wanting to sleep. So wake up. And this is a wake-up call for everyone who's there, that you have a role to play in the country. You have a role to play in the society. And as law students, as students who are studying law, you have a bigger responsibility towards women in particular, and to the mankind in general. Now, when I come to conviction in rape cases is just 27%. What does that mean? That means more than 70% of your, almost 70% of the rape accused goes scot-free. This happens because the cases go on and on for years. Tariq pe tariq, as we call them. Wards are made, collapsed, lawyers don't turn up, accused don't turn up, summons are not sent on time, and as a result, the process is delayed. In fact, in rape cases where young girls are involved, they go to the marriageable age by the time the hearing comes, and at that time, the parents don't want to pursue the case because they feel the girl has to get married and it may spoil her chances of getting married. Also, it happens that the witnesses are threatened. This is the real world. You will remember the Unnao case where the rape victim who had filed a case of rape against a sitting MLA of the ruling party, her father was arrested. A false charge of having an arms on him without license, an arm under the Arms Act, a charge was slapped on the father. He was beaten up in jail and he died. And later on, when the victim was going to depose her, she met with an accident. I'm not saying accident was orchestrated or it was normal, but she did meet with an accident. What does that speak of the law? What does that speak of the institutions which are there to provide you safety, security, to uphold democracy? The biggest culprit, I feel, is corruption. Because you can bribe the police, you can bribe the court clerk to not issue the summons, you can bribe the registry to change the board. It is not that we don't have sufficient laws. In fact, after Nirbhaya, Criminal Law Amendment Act 2013 came, and it made stalking an offense. It provided for a specific offense for acid attacks. You know, Uttar Pradesh has the maximum number of acid attack cases, and they start with stalking. Stalking, which was not even considered an offense before 2013. Young girls going to school are trailed by boys. Women who refuse to a marriage proposal by men, their faces are destroyed by throwing acid, saying, "Oh, you are proud of your looks, we will destroy it." Is this something to celebrate? Is this something to, I think we should hang our heads in shame. That even after so many years, even after so many years, we can't make our women safe. No, you have a law for stopping feticide. But let me tell you, in a span of 15 years, when the law came, only 1,000 cases have been registered. And when Amartya Sen talks of millions of missing girls, that so many girls are not born because of feticide. You have only 1,000 cases registered in a span of 15 years, and only 100 cases there was any conviction. Which is the irony of this country, that a married woman who is a young mother, a first-time mother, a second-time mother, but she is forced to abort her female fetus because the family wants a son. And another thing, what happens? First, she is forced to abort her female girl child. Second, she does not have the courage to go to the police station to file an FIR. Because forcing a woman to abort is also an offense under the IPC, which calls for 10 years imprisonment. So this is the reality, my friends. This is the truth of this country, that a mother who is forced, a woman, a married woman who cannot become a mother because she does not have a male child in her womb. And secondly, she does not have the courage to speak because she will be thrown out of the matrimonial home, even though you have law for both the things. So then the next question comes, have the laws failed the women of this country? Has the criminal justice system flopped? Or where there is a will, there is a way. That is what I feel. And I think the will is lacking, because we did make good laws. And if I analyze the laws, I find that there are enough laws for women. In fact, the justice system is tilting towards women. You have 498A of the IPC, which clearly says even mental cruelty is a cognizable, non-bailable offense with a punishment of 3 years. But today, the latest NCRB figures say that there are 2 lakh people in jail on 498A charges, of which around 50,000 are women. And these 50,000 women include grandmothers, sister-in-laws, who have nothing to do with the dowry harassment, who don't even live in that house where the complainant lives. That means that 498A laws are being misused for vested interests by some people. As a result, Supreme Court had to come out with an order and say, do not arrest immediately in 498A cases, first investigate. So what happens when you misuse a law? Genuine people suffer, genuine cases suffer. So is the case with rape. Now when we have death penalty for rape, now when we have life imprisonment for rape, then how can an adult educated female come out and say that I have been raped for 2 years, and that too under a false promise of marriage? So who asked you to sleep with that man when he promised you marriage? Why didn't you get married and then sleep with him, is my question. No, because we are in a permissive society and we feel we have a freedom of choice. We choose to challenge. We choose to challenge cultural norms. We choose to challenge values. We choose to challenge principles. And that is why we decide to sleep before marriage. And then when the marriage does not take place, we file a rape charge. You are students of GNLU. You are from the Center of Women and Child Rights. I want you to file a petition in the Supreme Court that the time has come that 376 IPC needs to be amended. On one hand, when you talk of death penalty for 376, then you cannot have death penalty for adult consensual sex. That needs to be split, and you need to have death penalty. You need to have life imprisonment for offenses of rape, which are done by unknown people, which are done by under force, which are done by gangs, which are gang rapes, by using physical assault. But sex which is consensual cannot be called rape. And our parliamentarians, they talk of women empowerment. They talk of empowering women at the time of elections, but once the elections are over, nobody is bothered. Otherwise, this amendment should have come by now, so that genuine cases of rape would not go unpunished. When conviction rate as per NCRB is 27%, The first thing which I'm told, oh, women file false cases. No, they don't file false cases. They file this because your definition says that sex under false promise of marriage is rape. And these are the cases which, in the police parlance, are called technical rapes. And these are the cases which are let off in the court because there is not sufficient evidence. So the definition is wrong. The woman is not filing a wrong case. There may be 5 to 10% who may have filed. In fact, again, if I come to the same thing under POSCO, no, if I come onto the teenagers, having physical relationship before 18 is an offense. But you have schools, colleges, students of 10th, 11th, 12th, and these are practical cases which I've seen. Young teenagers who are in a relationship, who are in a physical relationship, then the girls who elope with their boyfriends but are brought back by their parents. And then under parents' pressure, they go and file a case of rape. So I have gone to the Dongri remand home. I've gone to the children cell where I have seen that boys of 16, 17 are being further bullied, further sodomized because they are there under rape charges. And what was their offense? That they had fallen in love with their classmate who was 16 and who, under parents' threat and scare, has now gone and filed a case of rape. So these are the things, when we analyze the law, it is necessary that when you do projects, when you do internships, these type of cases you take up. In fact, I was handling a case in Mumbai. There was this young insurance banker who had come down from Lucknow, and she was wearing a gold chain. While boarding the train, somebody saw that she's wearing a chain, and he pushed her. At Kurla terminus, it happened. He pushed the girl, pulled the chain, and the girl died. She came under the local train. Imagine a girl of 24. And the parents came to me because they were from Lucknow, and they said, ma'am, you are the only one who can help us. People said you will be compassionate and kind to us. So when I took the case to the court, the accused was from Orissa, and his parents managed to get a false birth certificate saying that he is 17 years, 10 months. So by 2 months, he should not come under the Indian Penal Code. He should be tried under the juvenile laws and should go scot-free. When we raised this issue, and you remember when Menka Gandhi was the Women and Child Development Minister, at that time the law came that if a juvenile in the age of 16 to 18 commits an offense, it would be treated as a heinous offense and he would be tried under the IPC. So now we tried to use that law. We said, no, he's 17 years, 10 months. But the catch was, it said heinous offense of rape and murder, which has a punishment of more than 7 years. Now, even without the trial, how do you know what would be the punishment? When the lawmakers were making a law, they should have said only for rape and murder, not specifying the quantum of punishment. As a result, first we managed to get the case from Juvenile Justice Board to Sessions Court, but again this issue was brought in and the case was sent back. Not our case, but almost 20 cases where these juveniles had raped or murdered people, they were sent back. So that is why whenever a new law comes, I request this country, I request the lawmakers and law institutes that please read the law, analyze it, and if you feel it is not right, shoot a letter to the minister, shoot a letter to the government. I think at least that much you all can do. I immediately shot a letter to the Home Minister, Mr. Rajnath Singh, at that time that this law is faulty. And I think now recently, after 4 years, they are trying to amend the law. But in that 4 years, how many juveniles who had raped and murdered in the age group of 16 to 18 went scot-free because when the law was being made, the stakeholders did not pay adequate attention to it. So this is the issues. Laws are there, but the implementation of laws, the way they are worded, they leave so much space for defense lawyers to go scot-free to ensure that the accused goes scot-free. I hope I'm making a point because I feel I'm very passionate about law. In fact, now if I come to sexual harassment at workplace, you know, after the cases which I'm handling, I have filed a PIL in Bombay High Court. I have a case of a lady who is the chairman of the ICC, the Internal Complaints Committee. And she was working in one of the blue chip companies, big corporate houses. So as a chairman of the ICC, she received a complaint from 5 women that one of the vertical heads was sexually harassing them at their workplace. The inquiry was done, and she found that vertical head to be guilty of the charges that were placed on him, and she insisted that the vertical head was terminated. So at that time, I call it the boys' cozy club, because when it comes to issues like this, all the men in the company, be it institutes, they unite. And first, they would try to say that the complainant is in the habit of raising false complaints. The complainant is temperamental, and it's not in the right manner. But in this case, the vertical head against whom the sexual abuse cases were filed was terminated. The ICC recommended termination. And you know what happened after that? The story did not have a happy ending. The chairperson of ICC got her marching orders. After 3 months, the chairman was asked to go. And what was the ground of termination? Your interpersonal relationship is bad. You know, Asha ji is laughing. You know, this is what happens. So if you are made ICC member, think about it, that you will not be able to take action against your seniors. You will not be able to recommend action against your seniors because you work in the same organization. Your job will be at stake. So this lady who had worked in that organization for 17 years had outstanding ACRs for 16 years. But in the 17th year, when she recommends a punishment in a genuine case, there were 5 women who had deposed. She is now jobless and sitting at home. We have filed this PIL. We are saying, when ICC member, you want an ICC member to discharge duties of a civil court, because ICC members can summon people, record their statements, then are they not to be treated as judges for the period when they are ICC members? Should there not be a tenure? Present POSH law says for up to 3 years. And this lady had not completed 3 years. She had been only in that as ICC chairman for 2.5 years. But you loosely word state, because these laws are made by men, they make it so loosely worded that when they are put to test, they fall apart. So my ICC chairman is without a job. We have filed a PIL in Bombay High Court, and we are demanding that ICC members should be given protection that is given to a judge. They should have a fixity of tenure, and they should not be kicked out as long as they are in that post, and even after. And again, what we say, that when Article 14 talks of equality before law and equal protection of laws, so when women in government services, like yours is a government institute, I was working in a government institute, no problem comes in a government institute. Even you see, even at the time of Me Too, you did not have government institutions or women from government organizations come in and saying that we are being sexually harassed. It was film industry, it was unorganized sector, it was the private sector, because they have the rule of hire and fire. They have gone to Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court has upheld that maximum you can be given 3 months pay, you require a 1 month notice, and you can be fired. So an organization which has a rule of hire and fire, do you think that women will have the courage to use the POSH laws and file a case of sexual harassment at workplace? No. The moment a woman files a case of sexual harassment at workplace, at least in the corporate sector, I'm handling a couple of cases. These women are shunted to places where it is difficult for them to work. They are given shifts which are difficult to perform. And at least I have seen 60% have gone senile, because no job, no support, and running from pillar to post, it affects their mental health. So we have a very good law. We had the Vishaka guidelines, but we still have cases where we don't give justice to women at workplace. So is the case with other laws. I have discussed most of them. How much time I have? You can tell me. I think, should I wrap up in 5 minutes?
Sure, ma'am, as you wish, ma'am.
No, I because I have not put the time limit, so I should know, I should have put it. So what I'm trying to say, all these laws which have come, the juvenile laws, the rape laws, the POSH laws, they are made without getting the actual stakeholders on board. You should have NGOs. You should have people who are working. You should have institutes which are teaching law. You should have students. You should have students who are ready to volunteer. I work for Ransama. I have set up this Ransama Foundation. We opened a legal cell at Dharavi slums. You know who were the maximum women who came? The women who came to us where their husbands had deserted them and were living with other women. They were not giving them alimony. They left the children, left the wife, and ultimately, who was taking care of these girls? It was their poor mother, because they had nowhere else to go. And when we went to the police station, I sent my volunteers to go file FIRs. The police immediately says, "अरे ये तो husband wife का मामला है, छोड़ो, क्या आप इसमें आते हो?" From where does it become a husband wife ka mamla when a woman cannot give school fees, when a mother cannot feed her children, she is a dependent, and when you have your laws, you have your Domestic Violence Act, you have your laws, you have the family courts which talk of alimony, but alimony is when you are giving a divorce. But the divorce doesn't happen. He just goes off, marries another woman, lives with another woman. So he is not divorcing his first wife. He has just deserted her. So my question to the lawmaking authorities is, what laws are you giving for desertion? You know, what laws are you giving? And a woman who is cleaning, who is scrubbing, cleaning, who doesn't have the money, doesn't have the knowledge, where does she go? Supreme Court in 2018, I'm going to do a little something I just remembered, and I will talk about it before I end. 2018 Supreme Court came up with witness protection laws, and it specifically under Article 141-42 said that every state, it is a law, you have to provide for witness protection, and every state has to set up specific procedures whereby witnesses can be protected. In the Asaram case, 3 witnesses have been shot dead. One in Muzaffarnagar, one in Pawaya, that's Shahjahanpur. In fact, one Mr. Sachan in Lucknow, who was a witness in Asaram case, was kidnapped. So do you think people will have the courage to come and depose in a rape case? Do you think people will have the courage to come and stand up to these accused and criminals? And that is why the conviction doesn't take place. Now, I filed a PIL before Lucknow bench of Allahabad High Court. I said, I come from UP. I am in Mumbai. I am pained when I read every day that victims have burned themselves. They have committed suicide because police is not doing FIR. They are being threatened by the accused. In fact, last week only I was seeing on social media that the accused was out on bail, a molester, and then he shot the victim's father. So do you think people will come out? And when the Supreme Court said that you must provide for witness protection, you must provide for identity coverage, you must provide for places to depose in the court. So, but nothing is done. The judge in Lucknow bench tells me, you know what were his words? I was appearing in person. ये मैडम आपके बॉम्बे में होता होगा, आप सुप्रीम कोर्ट में जाइए, आप यहाँ क्यों आई? I said, Lordship, that is why UP is called a Bimaru state. Planning Commission had called it. I said, why should I not come here? I feel pained when I see Hathras happening. I see Unnao happening. I see Bulandshahr victims burning themselves. Kanpur, a mother being beaten up because her daughter dares to file a case of molestation. And you have your latest thing where a young bride, because was being harassed for dowry, she jumps into a river in Ahmedabad. What were her neighbors doing? My question is, why did they not know that a young girl is being bullied by her husband and her in-laws? Are we so apathetic? Have we no sense of propriety? We have no sense of concern. Only when we are affected, we will come forward. So laws are there, but there is serious defect in the implementation of laws. There's a serious defect in the criminal justice system. There are delays, there is corruption, the police is going to take money and destroy evidence. I was the lawyer in the Salman Khan hit and run case, and I was appalled when I realized that they let Salman go on the date of the accident so that his alcohol content in his blood, the report can go down. And also when the next day he came and they took out his blood for the alcohol test, they kept it in the fridge in the police station for Saturday, Sunday, and sent it on Monday. And that is the reason, in spite of one person dying and one person losing his leg, Salman Khan was let off in the Bombay High Court. So these are my experiences with law. Of course, I would still say that it has been worthwhile resigning, quitting from the government and starting a law practice, because I always say I am the voice for the silenced millions. I am the voice for the women who are facing trauma, trouble, but do not have courage to go out and complain. During lockdown, I was getting calls that, Madam, help us. Our husbands are hitting us, but when we call up the police station, police says there is lockdown. There is no way we can bring you out. You stay there and help yourself. So even at that time, NCW says I have started a phone line. My question is, do you think a woman who's there in the house and her husband is alcoholic or beating her, does she have the courage in a one-room house, pick up the call and complain? They should have set up a roadmap how to do it, like in Spain, Italy. They provided a mechanism that when the woman was going to the pharmacist to buy medicines, there she could say that I'm being harassed, I'm facing domestic violence. In fact, Spain and Italy had started a red dot campaign, that you go and say you have a small red dot and you say I am facing domestic violence, and immediately help will come. We have a lady minister as a woman and child, but she kept quiet. So I'm not blaming anyone, but I'm saying we did not rise to the occasion during COVID times. Even now we have not risen to the occasion, because the benchmark is women are not a vote bank. You do not stand up at the right time. Your reservation of 33% has not come even till now, because men feel that if women come, women are multitaskers, women have empathy, women have compassion, they are more serious. And I'm sure they will perform much better than these MPs who are sitting in the parliament. And they are scared that if we give our space to these women, they will never get it back. Countries which had women prime ministers, like New Zealand, they perform much better. The 7 leaders, Iceland has a lady prime minister. So what I'm trying to say is that women, if they are given a level playing field, they can perform better, they can deliver better, because they are multitaskers. They can work in office, they can go home and cook, and they can make their children do their homework, and after that they will press their mother-in-law's feet also. Which man will do that? So I would say, let us take a pledge that each one of us will help one woman and see to it that we make this planet a better place to live and survive. Thank you so much.
Thank you, ma'am, for your valuable insights. The second speaker for today is Ms. Shreya Maini, a 2000.
So I'm sorry to interrupt. I will leave because I have a television at 5 p.m. So thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you so much, ma'am. Thank you for your presence, ma'am. It was really, really a wonderful experiences that you have shared with us, ma'am.
Mamta ji, namaskar. Thank you.
The second speaker for today is Ms. Shreya Maini, a 2008 batch alumna and advocate on the record at the Supreme Court of India. She is currently practicing at the Supreme Court of India and the Delhi High Court at New Delhi. She specializes in cross-border dispute resolutions and has been accredited with numerous publications. Ms. Maini has completed her post-graduation in laws from the University of Oxford, UK. She has been an awardee of the Oxford Global Justice Award for Public International Law 2014-15. I welcome you, ma'am. It's an honor to have you.
Thank you so much, Nisha. It's also equally a privilege and an honor for me to speak after Abha ma'am, to speak after Mamta ma'am. Asha ma'am's invited me, been very, very kind. So thank you so much. A very good evening to all you wonderful ladies, and of course the men who've joined as well. I think we heard rather very strong views that I think I'm going to balance the talk a bit. Because I've had a very fortunate ride probably in the process, where I've had fantastic mentors as men even. My father has taught me the law right since the beginning as a child, and even as a lawyer till today, I go and seek refuge from him. William Sir was here. He's probably someone who's written my recommendations up until my LLM as well. Mamta ma'am's written too for me. So I've had a wonderful journey when it comes to even the men equally. And I think from a very balanced perspective, I'll try to make this a little more relatable to the extent of understanding that it's not gender specific. It's perhaps the celebration of women, men, even heterosexual and homosexual communities as much, because now we have a third gender. So we need to broaden our horizon right at the outset to understand that it's not just about man and woman. Legally speaking, I think it's about an all-inclusive society which we're looking at, to protect each and every person, perhaps arm them with the law so that we can get the benefits at max. So I'll try to take this platform to probably, of course, it makes me very nostalgic before I start, from Pawan Bhaiya's coffee, because I'm an alumni, so I remember so many things fondly from college. Night mess, Maggie's. I remember those little walks we used to have mid classes. I remember the Garba time in Gujarat. So all of that makes me very, very gutted and surreal when I speak. But I think I'm going to try to keep this as objective as possible, because the objective is to talk to you as lawyers, to talk to you as a woman lawyer. Prior to actually coming down to my journey as such, what I've done is I've planned a little bit of a pointer for you in terms of what my journey has taught me, about 5 to 6 aspects that I'd like to touch. But I think prior to that, I'd just kick off from where ma'am, when she was speaking last, had left at. We were looking at numbers. So I think I'm going to start with that and first put out a little bit of a perspective for all of you. When you look at law schools, so I'm going to start right from there. You see 50% representation or perhaps even more. So it's a 60-40 ratio. So it's not as if girls are not studying the law. We have awareness wherein women, girls are coming into the platform, and not even just girls who are probably reading the law, but also completing law school education, which is a fantastic step. So we also must applaud the gradation which we have walked from. That's one. Number two, also looking at women in the legal circles. It pains my heart to say this, but out of every 100 lawyers, only one perhaps argues being a woman. So it's a black sea of, it's a sea of these black-robed men, sorry. And you have this one woman lawyer who'd probably go out, express her opinions, be an arguing counsel. And as heartening it is, we at least have a silver lining that there are some women in the profession. So that's number two. We have a change that's even walking in the litigating circles. It's not just the corporate firms which are flocked by women lawyers, but we also have the litigation team surface with women who are keen to learn the law and even practice the law. Number three, I think what's interesting is, like we had touched, policymakers. So we have a 33% representation reservation coming in, but that doesn't get filled in. It's not something in the panchayats that we are seeing fully filled in also. So these particular amendments, though, have walked in, but I think it becomes interesting to watch where the law goes forward from there. So very interesting aspects play out. But what I'm going to start with is, whenever there's a woman in distress, legally, what all options she has. It could be a matrimonial dispute. It could be a rape matter. As a lawyer who practices in court, let me tell you, there are 4 categoric places where you can seek refuge. Okay, so if you are a woman in distress, or if you as a young lawyer get a brief, okay, this is my experience to go with it. The first thing you should do is dial 100. Get a criminal complaint on board, a police complaint. And if the police doesn't lodge your FIR under 154 of the CRPC, what do? You go and tell the magistrate that they're not lodging my FIR. You seek refuge under a 156(3) and a 200 of CRPC. So very, very interesting aspects play out right at first brush, that you have a protection of Women from Domestic Violence Act, which is a lex specialis, which is a standalone remedy if you're in a woman, probably in a shared household, in a matrimonial relationship with a man in his family. You also have a distinct 498A of the IPC, which gives you that power to lodge an FIR. And standalone with all of this, you also have a parallel remedy wherein you can seek maintenance under section 125 of the CRPC. I think ma'am mentioned what happens to deserted women. 125 is not only gender and religion neutral, but it also caters to deserted women. So there are a lot of options in the law where even a divorced or a deserted woman can actually seek maintenance under 125. So you do not need a classic divorce to happen there. So there are numerous nuances in the law which are slowly changing. So as lawyers, I think it's excellent a time to probably jump into this field, and especially as a woman lawyer, because you'll have a completely different take to the subject. So there are so many nuances in this aspect. Again, with rape, there is something called reverse burden of proof. So very interestingly, section 101 and 102 of the Evidence Act says it's always the prosecution which proves the guilt, because an accused person is actually tacit. The presumption of innocence will always be there because the burden of proof rests on the shoulders of the prosecution. But very interestingly, in rape matters, if you have a character or a conduct in question, It is a reverse burden of proof. In POCSO matters, the accused is presumed guilty. There will be an arrest. And once the arrest is done, he or she will probably get regular bail after the witnesses are cross-examined, after the main prosecutrix is cross-examined. So it's a long gradation. So it's not as if the law is not in place. The law is actually seated very well, even with Vishaka guidelines crystallizing today into what we have in terms of the act as such, which is actually the need of the hour also. But I think after POSH coming in, there are so many nuts and bolts which have been included in the POSH circuit as well. So a lot of layers there coming in, but very, very interesting again. So after Nirbhaya Amendment 2013, Kathua Amendment 2018, the Criminal Law Amendment Act today stands very, very robust. You do not need any more tightening of the screws because it's the chilling effects doctrine that comes into play. If you tighten the screw more, if you actually make the laws more stringent, you'd actually be insinuating the propaganda of those laws. So very interesting aspects play out there in terms of new laws like POCSO, surrogacy laws, maternity benefit laws coming in. You also have penology, internet contracts, special faculties for women there. Very, very interesting. Now contrast this with what exists in the CRPC. Let me take a minute here. Very interestingly, if you go to the bail provisions, there is special provision for a woman to get bail by the fact that she's a woman. So if you look at Kanimozhi's case, 2G Spectrum, Justice Shali of the Delhi High Court gives her bail. This bail is given mostly by virtue of the fact that there's a deference, there's a softness for the fact that she's a woman. She's the fairer gender. Now, these kind of aspects show that the law tries its best to balance, but it's slightly tilted towards women. And why? And for good reason, because we've had a history where women have been suppressed. So there's a method to the madness. But where do we need to stop that particular extent, or that fencing needs to be checked at? So what Mamta ma'am had said about balancing is actually very, very true. We have the laws, we are implementing the laws. Corruption is one aspect, but we need to have a check and balance. Because when we make a law, no doubt, Nirbhaya came in, Juvenile Justice Act came in, Juvenile Justice Act or the JJ Act had a particular section which was just amended a few weeks ago. But at that point in time, it was a knee-jerk law because one of the accused persons in Nirbhaya matter was a juvenile. He was let off and perhaps he was the main accused. All the rest, four of them, I think one committed suicide, probably when he was in custody after being a convict. 2 or 3 were hung, and there was one who was released at first brush because of the factum that he was a juvenile. So it's not as if the laws are not in place, but I think the mindset needs to change. The thought process needs to change. I've been very, very lucky, and most of us have been privileged who are listening to this conversation, that our parents think it fit enough for us to get the same opportunities that probably a boy, a child, or a man would get probably at every stage. I was not singled out when I was picked up for a law firm job from college. It had nothing to do with the factum that I was a girl or a boy. The fact that I was given an opportunity from all my teachers across the board to speak my mind, to write what I like, to express my thoughts, to go for a moot court competition, to write my recommendations for an LLM perhaps. So I think it's more about the mindset that needs to change with multiple layers of what we are seeing as a changing, evolution, metamorphosizing world. With the global laws changing, with also the global mindset changing, I think it's seeping slowly into the Indian soil. And it's going to take its own sweet time, but I think we're at least reaching towards a talk, a deliberation of change. So it's celebratory enough that we're having a chat about this, that we're talking about this, we're discussing this, and that's celebration enough, I feel. The second thing I want to point out is it's very important to have dialogue. I think that's very, very important because there are so many things when we discuss, we come out with solutions, and that's exactly what lawmakers do as well. So giving women leadership positions, giving them the ability to have a platform to speak their mind, giving women all those entrepreneurial opportunities which we're talking about. Give a woman probably 10 briefs and she'd do 10 fantastic cases. And it's not got to do with anything, the fact that he's or she is a woman or a man. It's the fact that if you give the same opportunity to a horse or a donkey, at the end of the day, you're going to reach the same place. So the opportunity platform is the equality under Article 14, the equal protection of law in terms of the equal opportunities is what we're seeking, whether it's 14.1, whether it's 15.4, whether it's 16.4. So all these articles of the Constitution, all the special privileges that stand in the Constitution, apart from the lex specialis, the special laws, mandate, and give us that equal opportunity which we are not getting. So I think these are talks that we need to have. These are the deliberations that we need to have. Also, very interestingly, there are some loopholes within the system, but these are not loopholes as such. These are probably even law commission recommendations which have constantly been looked at. For instance, let me give you an example. It's very disheartening, but a rape victim has to repeat her testimony at least 5 times. And I'll tell you how. One is when she goes to the police station, she recounts what's happened with her under a 376 charge, for instance, of the IPC. The second time, she's actually going to give her 164 statement before the concerned magistrate. So she has to repeat everything, the entire emotional trauma, agony, pain that she's gone through. She repeats the entire same episode there. Therein, after that, there could be a supplementary statement under 161 of the CRPC. So she again has to repeat everything there as to what happened on X date at X timing with me in verbatim. And all of these stories have to match. After this, she goes in for an examination in chief. She goes to a court of law and then she again deposes in the witness box. Katgare mein jaake wo fir se same story repeat karti hai. And after that, she's cross-examined. Her testimony is discredited. It's said to be unworthy. It's punctured at by the defense counsel. So you see 5 times. I probably don't even remember what I had last Sunday for lunch. I don't remember. I can't recall properly. But this is how the criminal justice expects me to behave. And on the contrary, if it's probably a rape charge which is being misused, the accused has no capability to get an anticipatory bail under 438 of the CRPC. He or she has to wait, and I'm saying she because we now have a third gender. He or she now has to wait to even seek regular bail under 437 or 439 of the CRPC. Until when? Till the witness is cross-examined. So this cross-examination may happen after initial investigation, after filing of charge sheet, after taking cognizance of charge sheet under 207 of the CRPC, a span which could be about 2 to 3 years. So for 3 years, you rot in jail. This is where the law gets misused. Now you have fast track courts cut to, but there is no limitation when it comes to rape cases again. That's another big question. So as a man, if you've been married to a woman, if you've been engaged to a woman, if you've had a sexual encounter with a woman, perhaps there is no limitation. You have to be careful all your life that there may not be a Me Too charge on you. So very, very interesting aspects to balance both ends. There are 2 sides of the coin, very, very interestingly. So I'm just putting this out for you because there are numerous opportunities and avenues for us to use. Having said this, let me now give you and play the devil's advocate and give you the other side. Very interestingly, whenever there is maintenance application that's filed in court, and I often file them, you have to wait as a woman for an ad interim maintenance under section 24 of the Hindu Marriage Act, for instance. You have to lead your evidence, you put out your income affidavits, assets, expenditure, etc. as per the latest Rajneesh versus Neha judgment, and you give out what sort of income you have, how much expenses you're making, and what kind of lifestyle you had, and what kind of maintenance you're expecting from your husband. Now, this process of affixation of ad interim maintenance, that means litigation expenses, in between maintenance takes up above, I think, almost 2 years. Even though section 125 of the CRPC says 6 months, this timeline is not strictly followed. There's nothing that a high court will do by a writ petition or certiorari also and reprimand the magistrate and say, jaldi decide karo maintenance. Nahin, kuch nahi hoga. So in practice, even though the law in theory would say something, in practice, it's very, very different. And with COVID, we're seeing incessant inordinate delays. We don't know when family matters will be taken up because most of them are not being considered urgent. Only bails are being considered urgent. Only stay applications are considered urgent post-COVID. So what happens to family matters? Will a lady keep waiting for maintenance under section 24 of HMA or alimony, permanent alimony under section 25 of Hindu Marriage Act? These are questions which we need to talk about, that perhaps the nuancing of the law has to now be tweaked and done, especially post-COVID, to answer such questions. Okay, I think I've spoken a lot about legal aspects, but now I'd like to actually brush up certain very interesting aspects from my own journey, and this comes from a personal space. And I think this is what I'd like to talk to you about when it comes to experiences from within. So very, very interestingly, I think as a woman who's practicing the law, I have certain aspects to talk about and touch, which I'd like to tell you that very, very interestingly, one of my first cases, I still remember, whether it was my first the first time I actually argued, my final arguments, my closing arguments, I think these are very, very important aspects to say that life puts you come from. Wherever you are, and I'm again repeating this, make the best of what you have. Okay, legally have the law in front of us. You're in NLU Gujarat, you'll be probably getting the faculties, the best of avenues to read, libraries. Grab this opportunities. I miss every breath of those 5 years. As many classes I may have missed, I may have overslept, non-attended, probably was chatting in class, but the kind of listen very carefully in class. You may not come home and read, and I'm okay with that. But listen very carefully, because that's going to stay with you for life. That's going to shape your career. Probably what I learned from Mamta ma'am from a Bangya and a law of taught class at that point in time, till today stays with me. What Asha ma'am taught me about precautionary principle, till today stays with me. So these are small things, probably a Rylance versus Fletcher still stays with me. And this is what is asked in the AOR exam. So look at how interesting life comes a full circle. I had to actually study literally half of what the others or my peers had to, because I still could remember what my professors taught me through law school. This is nothing with a woman, but I'm just putting this out as a tip generically for all of you, and especially as women, that we are going to find it a lot more harder on the way to prove our mettle. Why? Because there are people who come with biased notions. It's harder to get a brief sometimes because they expect a man to be more assertive in court, because of how probably a 6 foot tall man's assertive arguments would be. But it takes you extra effort. But if you're good, work will walk in. If you are good with your work, your legal work, your by word of mouth work will walk in. So you're going to get numerous opportunities to prove your mettle. The first 3 years of litigation are tough. And I left a corporate law job. I got a PPO from Amachan. I was placed from law school, but I think it was the bestest decision of my life. When I actually turned the wheel one day and I said, I'm not cut out for corporate life and I perhaps want to litigate. And that was the bestest decision. And I say this because I make almost or perhaps even more money than what I would have. And I get to do what I love, the law. I breathe it, I live it, I eat it. Constantly I'm working. And where do I get work from? I did not run after money the first 3 years. All I did was work. And I worked in a Challan court, I worked in the trial courts, I worked in the High Court, and today I'm an AOR practicing at the Supreme Court. And I remember this conversation categorically that I think I had with Mamta ma'am, that what do I do? And the first thing she said was, do what you love. Go for it. So I think grab every opportunity and have faith and confidence in yourself that you will make it sooner or later. Another very interesting tip I want to tell all of you women is, at the end of the day, after 10 years of law school, believe me, we'll be all at a similar position if you work hard. So even if you probably haven't gotten greatest of great grades yet in college, your CGPA is not that great, I think what you should as a woman lawyer do is also, or probably just as a woman who's studying the law do, is perhaps just work a bit harder, okay, in terms of other aspects, mood, get your conferences on track, get your teachers to have a good rapport in terms of knowledge sharing with you. These are little aspects which go a long way to justify and match up to those qualities which you may miss because of good grades, okay? So these are important aspects that I wanted to highlight through my journey. Another very interesting thing, or probably the third thing which I wanted to tell you, was drive and ambition. There are many times, I think that my father tells me, because the dinner table is dominated by 2 women. My mother is a practicing doctor and I'm a practicing lawyer. And we both assert when we come to the dinner table, and he says this very often, in retort or in reply to us, that, of course, women don't work as hard as men. They get it right the very first time. So it's a very interesting joke that we always crack, that women probably are more receptive also in terms of understanding a lot of times to comprehension. And it's got to do with science, that how a woman's brain, like ma'am was mentioning, could perhaps do 5 different things. So it's a scientific fact and it's very interesting. And this helps a lot as a lawyer, because you can view the same case from 5 different prisms. And that's a very interesting talk to have. So again, a very, very interesting aspect to honor your strengths, adorn your strengths. Don't worry about the fact that there are other 50 men in the room. What's important is you're a woman and you know the law, and that's where it should end. Last but not the least, a few very interesting aspects come to my mind with respect to not compromising with your ideas. So I think this is something as an alum I want to say, and I want to instill that want the best and you will get the best. If you start perhaps questioning every decision, that's going to be a problematic space to be in. So have that kind of those blinders or blinkers that a horse has. He just runs the race, and that's what's important. You're running your own race. Whether it's 50 men, whether it's 500 men, it shouldn't matter to you. What should matter to you is you're probably in a good law school, you're going to get a good job, and if you don't, come out to practice, and if you want to practice, pick it up. It is a fantastic space as a woman lawyer to be in, okay? Apart from this, I want to say that I had a very, very interesting journey. Before I end, I want to mention this, that it was a very interesting ride for me. I was in GNLU. I wanted to be a doctor. My mother was very disappointed that even after clearing the medicine entrance exam, I didn't become one. And I chose to come to GNLU. My father was very happy because he was a lawyer and he thought he'll get someone to now draft all those never-ending assignments. But I think when I walked into GNLU, I had no idea that I'm going to get this kind of support. I just studied hard. After that, I got a job with Amarchand. Very, very interestingly, I worked there for a few months, but I just didn't have my heart set on it. I had a chat with William sir, I still remember, and I told him I want to go. And all of my teachers said go. Thereafter, I was at Oxford. I was on a full scholarship, very interestingly. Again, something I didn't plan. Now, what I'm telling you is none of this had anything to do with the fact that I was a woman. It was pure merit. So if I can do it, all of you can do it as well. So all these aspects become very, very interesting for us to analyze. And thereafter, I was at the UN, the United Nations. So you never know where life takes you. It's like a roller coaster, just get on to it. I just want to say by the end of it that one important thing that we as women forget is we achieve or strive rather, or want to achieve perfection. I think failure is inevitable. So one thing we should all accept is if we are failing, if you're not doing well at a point in time, don't lose hope. Something else will come up and teach you something on the way, which you can implement later. I remember a very interesting matter I was doing a few months ago, and it was again during COVID. It was a false rape case. In fact, if I have the order, I'll share with you. It's very, very interesting. Ma'am, can I share screen with permission for a moment?
Shivani, can we please help her?
Thank you. Wait, let me try. Let me take you to this. Let's see if I have that. So that's a very interesting, I'll show you how it happens in practice actually. So when you talk of a false rape charge or something, we've spoken so much about it. So if you see the screen, here it is. Okay, I'm just going to, ma'am, is the screen visible?
Yes, yes, it is visible, Shreya.
Okay. So I'll show you one example. Okay, so this was a bail matter. So if you look at this one, it's called bail application number so-and-so. I was representing the petitioner. It's in public domain now, so it's fine. And again, this was Miss Justice Anu Malhotra giving an order through VC. So look at the kind of COVID times we're in. And again, a lady judge there. Interesting bit there. Okay, and this one says bail application, why present petition? The petitioner seeks regular bail in FIR number so-and-so, submitting to the effect that he has been falsely implicated in the instant case, placing reliance at page 19 of the petition, a letter of the prosecutrix submitted to the IO, investigating officer submits, wherein she is submitting that she does not want to pursue the case and the matter is an outcome of a misunderstanding. Very, very interesting, which is refuted by the state. It has also been submitted on, and I'll explain this to you in a minute. It has also been submitted on behalf of the petitioner that during the course of the proceedings, before the learned additional sessions judge, at the time of consideration of bail, when the court had asked the IO in relation to the letter written by the complainant or the prosecutrix, submitting that the FIR is an outcome of misunderstanding, which is clear and she does not want to pursue, the IO had submitted that the letter was handed over to her by the prosecutrix, but the letter has not been made part of the charge sheet, issue notice, etc., etc. Everybody to join, re-notify for so-and-so. This matter is still pending, but what I'm trying to tell you is, very interestingly, look at how false rape charges are actually affixed here. She gives probably an FIR in writing, a complaint, an original tahrir in writing. Thereafter, she submits a subsequent letter saying that, no, it was a business dispute. I've taken the money and I don't want to pursue this case. We move a bail application, but very, very interestingly, this subsequent letter is not placed in the charge sheet. So in the entire investigation which the investigating officer has done, the IO has to explain for reasons best known to her, why hasn't she placed this letter in the charge sheet? So very interesting. Now, this is a rape charge, 376. Person's been inside judicial custody, JC, for the past 4 months. He's absconding. He refuses to come back to jail, saying that I will not go to jail. Protect me, save me. It's a false case. Everyone knows there's a letter. But it's a rape matter, 376, reverse burden of proof. Go to jail first. After the prosecutrix probably getting cross-examined, come out. So very interesting power play. So this is just how the law actually plays out in practice. I thought that I'll just show you this order. And there are multiple more like this, that yes, there are laws. But I think what's important is that as women lawyers, we should consciously make an effort to do good law, to practice good legal work, to do a lot of pro bono matters, help wherever you can, and filter correctly. Don't let anyone misuse the laws. Okay, after that, it becomes a very shifty situation even to stand in court and lie. So very, very interesting nuances arise there. So I'd just like to sum up by saying that it's been a fantastic journey for me, I think, as a lawyer and as a woman lawyer especially, and as a woman law student. It's been a fantastic journey, a roller coaster that I've had. And after these many years, rather my very young years of legal practice, I can just say thank you for the opportunities I've gotten, and I've made the best of it. And I just urge everyone who's listening to me in terms of young women who are making lawyers, young budding law students, to probably get there. That's all I can share of my little experience. Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you so much, ma'am, for sharing your experiences and your wonderful insights. I would now, to conclude this session, I would like to request the head of the center, Dr. Asha Verma, to deliver the vote of thanks.
Thank you. Thank you, Nisha. It is an honor for me to propose the vote of thanks to this talk that we have organized on the occasion of International Women's Day. And it had been really a privilege to listen to three of the successful women who are actually the best example of women empowerment. I'm thankful to all the resource persons and thankful to my Dean Academic Affairs who has delivered the welcome address. And Madam has actually very emphatically stated that when it comes to the women empowerment, it's not a new topic. It's not something new which we are discussing in today's event. But as far as the women empowerment is concerned, it has always remained a topic of discussion. This is something where there is actually the need of continuing doing the research. And when it comes to atrocities against women, as ma'am has correctly stated in her speech, that there is no end to the violence or the atrocities that the women face. Madam has also very rightly pointed out that we can actually bring the change by educating the women. And equally important is the economic empowerment, which will actually bring the change in the society. So on behalf of Center, ma'am, I'm really very thankful to you. I'm thankful to you from the core of my heart for delivering the welcome address, ma'am. Thank you once again. I'm also thankful to our resource person, Advocate Abha Singh. Madam has very well highlighted about the laws which we have. The problem that we have is the actual implementation of the law. The problem is relating to the corruption. Ma'am has also very well highlighted about the developments which have taken place. So there is no such, as far as the development in the laws is concerned, there is no such lacuna. There are continuous developments which are taking place. When we take example of Nirbhaya, when we take example of the later developments which have taken place after the other incidents, the Criminal Amendment Act. So this is actually trying to bring the changes in the society. But Madam has also very rightly stated that what is lacking here is the will. Will is lacking somewhere, and that is the main problem. And as far as laws are concerned, it is slightly tilted towards the women. But the problem is that to what extent we are actually going to implement, we are actually going to enforce the laws. Madam, in her speech, has very well highlighted about the amendments which have taken place in the criminal law and the domestic violence law. She has also talked about POSH 2013. She has also talked about the serious defects which are there in the implementation of laws, the delays, the corruptions. These are some of the points. These are some of the problems that Madam has very rightly stated in her speech. And her presentation, her experiences has actually told us about the passion that she has towards helping the women. So I'm really thankful to ma'am in her absentia. She has actually, she has very cordially consented for delivering this speech for us in today's event, and I'm really thankful to ma'am. Now coming to our own student, Shreya, we are very, very thankful to you for accepting our invitation and for sharing your experiences. You have very well highlighted about the balanced approach that we should have, and how the men's, they also, I mean, there are few men's that you have said that they have actually contributed in the successful journey of law, the legal profession that you have. And you have also very well highlighted about the inclusiveness in the society. So why we are only talking about women, we should have an inclusive approach. Then you have also talked about the education, how education can actually bring a change, how the changes are actually taking place when it comes to law, when it comes to legal profession. There are ample opportunities available for women also. There are so many developments which are taking place in the law also. There are so many amendments taking place. But what is needed is to curb the corruption, and it's also important to have the check and balance so that there is no such corruption. You have also very well highlighted that there is a need to change the mindset, which I totally agree. This is something which is lacking. You have also talked about the equality provisions which are already available under the Indian Constitution. But the need is that to what extent we are actually trying to bring that equality, we are actually trying to establish that society. This is something very, very important which you have spoken about. And Shreya, you have very well, shared your experiences. You have very well, as an inspiration for our students, you have very well, highlighted some very, very important points that how the law students can actually, they can aim high, they can dream, and they can work hard to realize those dreams. And you have very rightly stated that failure is inevitable. So we should not be afraid of those failures. We should actually constantly work to achieve the targets that we have fixed, as you have achieved. So Shreya, it's really great to have amongst us, and you are truly an inspiration for all our students. I hope Madam will agree with me, Dean Madam will agree with me once the pandemic is over and we will have a normal working. So certainly we would like to have you in the campus so that you can directly interact with our students. So thank you once again, Shreya. And I'm also thankful to my director, who has always been a source of inspiration for us. He keeps on motivating us for having such events wherein we can invite our own students who can actually share their journey with us, and we can come to know what had been the reasons for their success. I'm also thankful to my Dean Research, who always gives us the innovative idea. How can we keep on organizing such kind of events? I'm also thankful to our registrar, who is very supportive. He keep on extending his fullest support for organizing all such center activities. I'm also thankful to my faculties, research staff. I'm also thankful to the admin staff. I'm thankful to my own colleagues, center members, who have actually helped in successful organization of this program. I'm also thankful to my student members. I'm thankful to Shivani especially, who has actually taken care that the program is conducted in a smooth manner. At last, I would also like to announce that this is for the first time that we have taken up this initiative of announcing the essay writing competition. So on this momentous occasion of International Women's Day, through Center, we would like to announce the essay writing competition on the theme related to women law and the child rights. So very soon we will be publishing it on all our social medias. So students can actually go through the guidelines through the social media platforms. With this, we come to the end of this program. I extend my thanks to all of the resource persons. I'm thankful to Dean Academic Affairs for extending the support, and I'm thankful to all my students. Thank you once again.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you once again.
Thank you, Asa ma'am. Shreya, I really feel proud of you. And Asa ma'am also is one of my dearest colleague. You are really how you spoke and how you are matured in such a small span of time. I know you are very brilliant. Achievement is one thing, but see the personality, how you spoke, like your experience. Really, I feel very proud. Shreya.
You know, ma'am, I'll take a minute here. Yesterday, I was just jotting some points at night after work, and my mother asked me, what are you doing? So I said, I'm putting down some points for the, talk today. So they asked me, but how do you think it'll go? What will happen? I said, I have very biased judges on the panel. Whatever I talk, they will really appreciate me because I'm taken back to my times of law school. Honestly, at least I'm happy that I could see all of you. And I look forward to meeting you very, very soon, ma'am, in person. Both
You
of
made us very emotional.
Oh. I remember last time I was the farewell day also.
Thank you,
How
Shreya.
time passes. Thank you so much, ma'am, for everything, really. All of you have such a hand to play in our growth, our journeys. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. We are really proud of you.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you. Okay, ma'am. Thank you so much.
Okay,
Thank you,
bye.
ma'am.
Bye. Take care.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Should we end here?
Thank you, Asa ma'am.
Thank you so much, ma'am.
I have followed your instruction.
Ma'am, request, ma'am. Sincere request, ma'am.
Okay, thank you. Bye.
Bye, ma'am. Bye.